Everybody ready? All right, we call to order the meeting of the Municipal Authority, February 21, 2023. We just came from an executive session to discuss litigation matters. Okay, and I'll do a roll call. Maria Kane here. Mr. Greco.
Yeah.
Mr. Montefiore.
Here.
Mr. Rosenthal.
Here.
Mr. Mackel.
Here.
Engineer Dave Porter.
Here.
Operations Manager Stephen Neese.
Here.
And our solicitor Mike Madron.
Here.
Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Any- Second, thank you. Any comments or questions? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, next you've received a copy of the minutes from our last meeting, January 17, 2023. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve.
Thank you. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right, thanks, Paul. All those in favor?
I've comments
Sorry,
on it.
comments?
Yeah, so
That?
the minutes for the new business section,
Mhm.
I don't think clarified the fact that we tabled. It says there was a motion to table and then it was only listing two board members voting. And I think everybody voted. If you look at the minutes for section, for item 12.2, 12.3, 12.4, and 12.5. And I think we did it sort of as an omnibus, so I don't know how you'd want to reflect that in the written minutes, but
Just maybe
That's-
naming everybody else. Since we all voted.
We'll get it clear. Yeah, it's probably just a confusion between the
Yeah.
motion and the second, and the actual voting party, so.
that's it.
Any other comments on the minutes? All those in favor?
Aye.
And we're gonna have that reflected in the minutes as a motion that includes Lewis's amendments.
Absolutely. Okay, next on the agenda is the treasurer's report. And Steve, will you be giving that or?
I'm going to hold off. I think we're still working for year end for close, so I don't have anything that I'm going to give you at this point. I think we have some discussion further down on the budget and the fee schedules. And so at that point, we'll talk more about the report at that time.
All right, thank you.
You have a finance director for the municipal authority yet?
Well, I have a finance director for the township, which means we have one for the municipal authority too. So she started today. And so we spent most of our day, thank you. We spent most of our day kind of doing a first blush of things. And we actually probably spent more than half of the day talking about municipal authority things. So
Right.
we're getting her up to speed. She told me she's coming back tomorrow, so we're in good shape.
You might come to one of our meetings, maybe, Steve?
Yeah, I'll have her come. I didn't make her come her first night to this, so but we'll get her down to see you guys.
All right. We'd appreciate that.
You're such a generous boss. Didn't make her come first.
So I thought it was not the best way to get her started.
Oh, God. All right, next on the agenda is the engineer's report. Dave, do you have anything for us? Looks like you do.
Yes, there's 3 items on the agenda. Thank you, Madam Chair. First item with regard to the KBX update, recall that there is some recommendations for repairs that KBX Golden, our wastewater operator, has included in their operations and maintenance reports on a monthly basis. We received an updated report, I think it was back in December of 22. That was pretty comprehensive. We scheduled a meeting with KBX Golden and our pump vendor for the sewer project to go out and visit various stations. And one being for a maintenance item for the old Masters pump station since that pump station's been completed mechanically, it's been sitting there for a while. We went out and did some maintenance on just rotating the pumps and motors and making sure that everything turned properly, which it did. Did some maintenance as far as pumping down some water in the wet well that's accumulated over time. The list that KBX has generated has been updated in the January version of their report. Some of the items, one being a heater that hasn't been working at the Camelot pump station. They found that there was some wiring that was switched, so they troubleshot that and resolved that issue. George Sharretts from Newtown Public Works has also worked at the Goshen pump station to determine that the account for the water service to that station has been transferred over. KBX was able to do some things out there to make sure that the water service was in fact turned on and operating at that station. So they did have potable water for cleaning at the station. There's also, I think it's a backflow preventer at that station that needs some maintenance items on it. The larger items, as far as the bioxide systems at Newtown Hunt, Springton Point, and the Goshen pump station, I did reach out to Evoqua, who was the vendor for bioxide systems on that. The gentleman that we work with through the sewer project is no longer the point person for that. However, the regional manager who took his place was involved with the sewer project. So I'm trying to get coordinated a conference call with those two gentlemen to go over some of the issues that we've seen there. They did recall having some connectivity issues during the construction of the project as far as the electrical and just making some of those components work. So I'll update the authority once that meeting is set. With regard to the electrical, I think there was one electrical issue at Newtown Hunt where there was an exhaust fan that was not operational. I did contact Lenai Electric, who was the electrical contractor for that job, advised them that there was an issue with that particular component. Basically, you turn the switch on, we manually activated the thermostat. The mechanism did turn on, but it didn't turn the motor. The motor buzzed and there was some smoke in the motor. So we shut everything down, turned the breaker off, and then trying to get some resolution to that. What's complicating the issue is that the component was ordered by the pump station contractor, not the electrical contractor. The electrical contractor just did the wiring. So they're looking into the component as far as what the warranty may be on that particular motor. I do know that the 18-month maintenance bond for Lenai's contract was up last July. So we're out of that 18-month maintenance period for that particular item. So I do have a call scheduled with Steve Hudak from Almeida and Hudak, who is the general contractor that did all of the pump stations on the sewer project, to go over this list in entirety, which includes not only the pump stations that were constructed for the sewer project. They coincidentally were the contractor on the Ellis Preserve pump station as well. So I'll be able to hopefully set up a field meeting and I'll coordinate with Steve and George Sharretts to get eyes out there. Hopefully Hudak can respond and we'll get out there and get some resolution to these items. So that's the update on the KBX list. If the authority doesn't have any questions on that, I'll move on to the next agenda item.
Good on that. Everybody else?
Yes.
The French Road easement update, I don't know how much the authority has been apprised of this, but there's French Road is in the SR2 sewer service area in the northeasterly portion of the township. Off of Sawmill, Steve? Or is it off of Earl's Lane? Earl's
Green Country.
Green Country. It's next to the Green Country community.
No, it's off of Earl's Lane.
It's all Earl's, right?
Yes.
My neighbor.
So
Yeah, Earl.
that the sanitary sewer up there is a little peculiar because of the topography. There is sanitary sewer in the street. At the end of a cul-de-sac bulb, there's two lots that have a sanitary sewer lateral that extend through both of the rear properties. And I believe it serves 3 lots. So the third lot drains through the other 2 that have easements on their property that connects into the authority sanitary sewer main. What George Sharretts has been looking at was whether the sewer easements in the rear yards of those 2 properties are the authority's easement, and in turn, the authority's sanitary sewer line. So we're trying to investigate that. The deed research that George provided me indicates that the authority does have easements. I didn't see anything in there that indicated that the line was the authority, but presumably because the easement is on behalf of the authority, that it would be the authority's line.
Is there a chance that it's anybody else's easement, or is it definitely our easement?
It's hard to say. I would have to pull out probably subdivision plans for that community to see if there's any notations on there. The portions of those plans that I've reviewed indicate that there are sanitary sewer easements. It doesn't indicate who they're to the benefit of. And actually the adjacent easement where the sanitary sewer main extends through just is simply indicated that it's a sanitary sewer and drainage easement. It doesn't indicate that it's public sewer, private sewer, authority, township, anything. Private property owner or anything. So,
But I think the issue, and I think they just mentioned this, but the thing that's before us is that the property owner is coming back and saying, who's the one who's responsible for this backup problem that they're having? And so, as we're trying to figure this out, we have this issue, this backup. And so we've.
Is it backing up into 1 house, 2 houses, or
I
3?
don't know if it's just backing up into the one or I'm not sure it's exactly going in the house. I know it's at least coming out in the yard.
And do we
out,
know
yeah.
the reason for the backup? Is it?
We
roots
believe
and
it's a
things like that,
problem
or-
further down. We believe it's a problem that may be within.
flushable wipes.
Yeah,
So that's been the cause or contributor to.
But I'm not sure
Those
then
issues.
why it's our problem.
well, if it's our line in easement, then it's ours. Right?
But if the cause is from the user putting flushable wipes into it,
I mean, we can go back against them, but
It's not by that person.
Not the complainer or
Right.
the neighbor.
okay, so
Yeah.
we have someone along the line.
putting it in.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
So that's what the question that I think is coming up and that the question is, do we go ahead, take the chance and take an action on it to protect the authority and just go ahead and take action without knowing the full extent right now, why we're doing the research? I don't think we have an answer right away. We were hoping to have a quick answer, be able to move forward and do that. We could track the cost. If the cost really isn't ours, we could potentially send it back. I don't know what they would pay or not, but that's where we're running into this challenge about something that's
Yeah, and-
probably 40 years old or
Yeah,
so.
and or even older, Steve. I
Yeah.
mean, that system is pretty old out there. It's analogous to, folks that are putting grease down
Yeah,
system.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily cause a problem at that location. It's downstream that it manifests, but with it being wipes or whatever rags, that tends to be indicative of a more localized problem. Especially if there's only 3 houses on it and you're looking upstream at 2 other neighbors or one other. I can't remember which one was the complainer. Aside from, doing outreach and education and just saying, hey, look, here's some mailings. You can't put these things down the sanitary sewer main. They're flushable, but they don't decompose. you know, I don't know what the resolve is other than televising it and
Is it definitely one of the three that would be putting whatever is clogging
Yeah.
this? Okay.
yes,
And then we're not sure as to what rights we have to look at a certain area of pipe involved.
Rights or obligations.
Rights or
Obligations, but we know each homeowner has an obligation from their home to where it connects.
correct. Yes,
I do think it would be worth communicating, since it's only three homeowners. And it's likely being caused by one of the three, that they each receive a very short notification from the municipal authority as to, what is appropriate and what's not appropriate for putting into these lines, and that we're investigating it further. I don't know if we'd want to say something like, and continue to keep us apprised of the status of the backup, but we certainly haven't made a determination at this point as to whether or not it's our obligation. And they're right to have us go out there and resolve this.
yeah, and I will continue to work with George and Steve on determining, and Mike would probably be the most appropriate one to determine legally if there's anything on a plan or in a recorded deed that might indicate whether the authority has any obligation there.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Lastly, on my agenda is an old master service area expansion update. I think we covered a lot at the last authority meeting. There's not a whole lot of update other than the possibility that we may be able to now access our easement for the electrical construction. We have been communicating with Pico just to confirm that they are early March for their transformer work and connection work. So it sounds like if we get the go ahead, we'll be able to have our electrical contractor respond and mobilize within a couple of weeks and get that done within a week to 2 weeks once they're out there. Obviously, then we're still working on access, but we will at least be able to get the pump station started, tested, and verify that it can be run properly. Two other things of note I wanted to mention to the authority that our Chapter 94 waste load management annual reports for the calendar year 2022 have been submitted to the RHM Sewer Authority and to CDCA last Friday. We're also working on an I&I report to Delcora, and as part of that report, RHM Sewer Authority shares with us their 2022 annual report, where they indicate how many manholes that they've repaired, how many lineal feet of sanitary sewer that they've televised. They've done razor rooting or root intrusion removal in the sanitary sewer main. So all of that's quantified in that report. And once it's filed, I'll provide a copy to Steve so he can share it with the authority. That concludes my engineer's report.
All right. Before we move on, I just want to make sure that I asked the public that's here. I know that we have a couple members of the public. If there's any comments on agenda items only, you can feel free at this time to come up to the podium and speak if on an agenda item. If it's not on the agenda, we'll give you another opportunity towards the end of the meeting. Okay. Just give us your name and your address and.
Bob Young, 114 Hunters Run, Newtown Square.
Okay.
I'm the treasurer of Hunters Run Homeowners Association. I just wanted to let you know that our water usage has remained stable since I was here last on our monthly usage. It continues to be at about 250,000 gallons per month, which is accurate for when we have no leaks. So we'll be coming up on our third water bill since the repairs were made. So it'll be 3 months at that. So I guess tonight you'll be discussing the possible reimbursement to us for water that did not go through the system. I see the staff calculations, and if 3 months, consistent usage is not sufficient for the authority, we're certainly willing to wait, for 6 months, 8 months, whatever you think is appropriate. And at the moment, we could accept, one of the staff calculations and then revisit it at whatever time you choose, assuming that our water usage remains consistent.
I think well, I guess we can discuss it when we get to that point on the agenda, which might be best. So, I guess the one question I do have now, though, do you have any, information on current leaks?
We don't believe we have any current leaks right now. We think we finally have them all, at least for the moment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else for public comment? And next, we're moving on to Steve Neese and his operation manager's report.
So I just have a couple things that just want you to be aware of on behalf of the township, but also impacts you. I signed a document that BPG or Equus has actually reduced their demand or their request in regards to the usage that they thought they would have from 10,575 to 9,450. So I just wanted you to be aware of that decrease in regards to their gallons per day for buildings C1, C2, C3, 4, and 5. So this, I know they were in before you and presented the other, and so we did that. We've had a couple conversations with you regarding that. There have been some challenges where there's a backup that causes a backup into Dunwoody. The good news, as I understand it, we had a high water alarm that went off. So before anything went back into Dunwoody, that was caught ahead of time, is my understanding. Dave, you hadn't heard anything different, had you? No, so that's what I understand. So that's the good news. The bad news is we had a high water alarm go off, which means we had another problem with grease in that area. So with that in mind, if the authority is willing, I would like to meet with our solicitor and our engineer and come up with a plan that would require a little bit more of an action potentially on our part of going out and maybe even having mandated grease trap inspections that are by us in addition to what they're doing. They're supposed to be doing grease trap inspections, I believe, once a month or something like that from each individual place that has them and having them cleaned, sending us the reports. But I think that this is something that continues to keep happening. I think we need to be potentially a little bit more aggressive. What I don't know is can we be more aggressive in one area without being more aggressive in the entire service area. So that's the reason why, if it's okay with you, I'm going to engage our engineer and engage our solicitor, and we're going to kind of come up with a solution to come back to you hopefully at next month.
It would not just apply to them. It would apply to other sort of large.
Well, it may apply across the township,
Right.
but right now this is an area where we know we have a problem. It's a repeat problem on a incredibly regular basis.
For some reason I recall, and I'm hoping it's not just a phantom thought, but I thought that there was something that, was being thrown into the sewer, and they were going to install grinders or something.
So we had a situation, if I recall, and Dave can give me some more input on this. We had what we thought were like diapers that were ending up in the wastewater system, which is a terrible thing. It's kind of like people think these wipes are, disposable wipes or whatever, they can go down the system. They really can't. They just clog up the system. And so, and maybe we need to do some education on that part, reminding people like across the board So maybe even in the, the authority might do an article in the township newsletter or, just saying, hey, know that this is an issue. And we have done some things like that from time to time, but I think we need to do it again. That was a problem that happened several times, but the last several times have been a grease issue and have been a significant grease issue. And so we just feel like we need to be, we're looking at this saying, because I can't remember if it was RHM or KBX came out and cleaned it for us. I don't remember which one it was, but literally like 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks before. So it's not that it's not being done regularly. We are doing it regularly. And we went back and looked how long it had been since the clean, and it wasn't that long. And so we have got to be more aggressive at the origin of the problem and looking at that. And, if you recall, 2 years ago, 3 years ago now, maybe 3, I'm losing track. We had that problem behind frescoes in that area. It was a problem. So this is not an isolated issue, but we need to, this is one that keeps happening more often than any other place in the township. So
Yeah,
if you're
under the
unless-
guise of maintaining the system, I think the operations team needs to do what the operations.
I need engineering and legal support to do what we need to do. And that means there's going to be some expense to you. That's why I'm asking. Okay.
Yeah,
All
so
right.
are you looking for any authority from us?
I
tonight?
think
Just
that
to-
if you give us the nod, that's enough for us to move forward to do that. I think it kind of comes under their normal, what they bill, but I just wanted you to know that I'm asking for specifics in an area.
Yeah, and I think you have that from us. I mean, I have no objection to it.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Not at all. I
Okay.
encourage it.
And then, report.
Okay,
back.
we'll work on that. I don't know how soon we'll have it, but hopefully within between your next 2 meetings.
Sounds good.
And
That
maybe
sounds
I could
good.
add one more comment to that. So not just that, but if there are other components of the system that you think, need to be brought to our attention, or you guys need to take action on,
We'll
raise them,
continue.
we'll
continue to do so, yeah.
It's,
A quick question, was there any connection between this issue here and the one at Luigi's and Giovanni's? In that?
No,
Okay.
it's the same problem,
Similar problem.
similar problem.
So,
Yeah, I was gonna say similar problem. Different issue. Or
I
different
think
location.
Here, we're talking about a recurring one too.
Yeah,
And. So
I mean,
it's
I
important
think
to start
Dunwoody has
there.
had stuff come back into their area 3 or 4 times in the last 5 years.
Yeah, and Steve, I just wanted to kind of point out one thing with regard to them having a high water alarm. I'm a little confused how that transpired, because on the discharge side of their pump station, there's a check valve that's supposed to prevent anything from our sanitary sewer coming back in.
Yeah.
So whether the pumps just couldn't overcome the head pressure from the backup in the
That was my
sewer main,
understanding.
that's probably what it was.
And let's make sure you come to a conclusion as to what that was, if you can, based
Yeah.
on who knows where the water is now, right? So.
Well, hopefully the water's gone and
It's
it's not.
gone now, but maybe we can.
Yeah.
come to
My
some
understanding,
conclusion.
that's what we thought it was that
Okay.
the pumps didn't have enough head pressure to push past it.
Yeah.
But
The system did what it was supposed to do and prevented it from going back into Dunwoody. So that's.
yeah,
a
that's
win.
exactly,
Yeah.
we were happy about the one, we were unhappy
Yeah.
about the other. So the good news, the system worked. The bad news is we had a problem.
All right, moving on, unless anybody else has any questions, we're gonna move on to the bills under 10.1. Consider approving the 2022 bills on check register A dated February 21, 2023, totaling $157,375.33. Do I have a motion?
so moved.
Okay, do I have a second? Thank you.
One quick question before we vote.
Yeah, sure.
Steve, at what point do we think we won't get 2022 bills anymore?
Probably this was the last time, one possibility. I started finalizing, going through I turned my mic off. Probably this will be the last month. There's a small possibility next month, depending on what I get done, what we get done, but it most likely anything that we have going forward will have to be an audit adjustment, and then we would
Yeah,
act accordingly.
That's was gonna be my next question.
Yeah, so we're getting close with having the finance person just now starting. It's probably gonna take us 30 days to pull everything together. So it might be that there's something at your next one, because if we can do it by doing it that way, it's the easier way. And it's less work from the auditor standpoint, but I know the audit's gonna get moved off probably at least 30 days. So that's where we are.
Great, thank you. No other comment?
All right, and I think we have a motion on the floor. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that motion passes. Moving on to 10.2. Consider approving the 2023 bills on check register A dated February 21, 2023, totaling $416,044.26. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Right, any questions or comments on that one? I don't think we have a second. Second?
I'll second.
Second from Tom, okay. And now any questions or comments? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, 11.1, consider approving the following payments from the bond associated with the 537 Public Sewer Project build-out. $395 to Herbert McCombie Engineers for Part 2 permit work associated with the Ashford service area, and $2,065.62 to Herbert McCombie Engineers for Part 2 permit work associated with the Camelot service area. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments regarding those items? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, moving on, consider approving a payment totaling $108,000, $180 to JMC Contractors for work related to the stream bank restoration project at 314 Summit Avenue. So we're approving this payment. The check run will probably go out with the next set of checks, and we'll have to ratify later, but can I have a motion on approving that payment?
So moved.
Thank you, Tom. Do I hear a second? Thank you. Any questions or comments about that amount? There was information in your packet about it as well. Okay, all
I
those-
just want to clarify, we're going to cut the check this week, so
Okay,
we're not going to wait until your next check run.
okay, perfect.
So I just wanted to make sure that you all, that it's clear to you and to the public, we're cutting that. You're approving the payment, and it'll be on your next check register when you do that. So I just wanted to be clear.
Thanks for the clarification, Steve. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, consider approving the $41.36 refund to Wawa Food Market at 18 North Newtown Street Road for an overpayment on the sewer bill from 2017.
So moved.
I'll second that motion, just because I have to hear some explanation as to where this 2017 request for a refund came from. Steve, do you have information on that?
So this was sent to my desk. Wawa had undergone a bunch of different property owners, and I think they're just getting caught up from back bills, and this was just something that they pointed out. Dallas Data forwarded it to us, and we're taking action on it here tonight.
Okay, and from your research, does it make sense for us to be refunding that?
It does, and we've done it before too, so.
All right, thank you. All right, any questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right,
You made a comment about accountants before.
yeah, exactly. I think that's what it's attributable to. All right, discussion and possible action regarding the proposed refund to Hunter's Run HOA due to the water leak between June and November 2022. Steve, do you have any additional information for us? I think last time we kind of tasked you with, and I know you put a lot in our packet, and I think we've had an opportunity to review. I don't think there's a motion on the floor, so are we okay to just kind of get some information here, Mike, before we put it? Okay, thank you.
So the only update I have right now is, as Mr. Young said, he provided 2 months instead of one as opposed to last month. Seems to be right on par with what it was in December. December of 2022, they used 254,000 gallons, and January 2023, they used 255,000. So it seems like it's flattening out a little bit.
That's at least good news.
Yeah.
All right, and then we have the issue of the request for the refund and how much is being requested. There's no specific amount on the agenda, but I think there was a specific amount provided by Mr. Young and provided a packet. And last meeting, you're right. Is it the $12,168.82 refund requested? Or is it 9,000? Why don't we have 12,000 on the?
So I attached all the calculations. So
Okay.
on page 29 of the packet, it shows December's request.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
And the one right after that shows after January. That is the $12,468.89.
So that's for 2 different months. Is that what we're saying?
So
Trying to figure out.
it's an
how we're getting-
updated version of what was submitted last month.
Okay, and what time period is that for? The leaking.
So the leaking for this proposed refund occurred between June and November of 2022.
Okay. But why is the amount different, I guess? Because that wasn't that the same time period we were looking at the last time?
It is, but the calculations that Mr. Young used last month, it was based on December of 2022. And this updated version is December and January, the most recent ones.
So I think the issues here are we don't have a full year's worth of numbers
Right.
to compare this to.
Yeah, but
which
in
would be
fairness-
Typical.
In fairness, if there was other leaking going on, I don't think the authority should be financing an improvement on the plumbing system forever.
Absolutely. Yeah,
You know, I mean, the passage of time and reparation of infrastructure. I don't know. That's just my thought. And I'll just sort of like echo a comment I made at last month on this. Whatever we refund because water was leaking on at this HOA just goes on the backs of everybody else and all the other customers in the authority. I mean, we don't have a reserve or retained earnings to sort of process this refund. So whatever we ultimately decide to do with this, it's going to be borne by every other ratepayer in the sewer system.
right, and which is why, it's always our recommendation that there be meters involved, if people know that they're not going to be using the sewer system and our sewer lines for the wastewater, we obviously recommend that there be meters in place. And, what concerns me here is that although there appears to be no leaking now, because of the systemic problem over there, that there could be leaking down the road. And I'm wondering, unless there are separate meters put in, maybe per unit or per building or more than one meter, we're gonna run into this problem again. And I hate to say it this way, but I'm looking at the amount of the request for refund, and I'm looking at what, 76 units over there or so.
Right.
And it's a lot to bear, but I mean, to me, if I'm in a facility that has an issue with the sewer lines, then as a group, we've got to resolve that problem because, we can't expect the authority to underwrite the, the improvements necessary.
No,
to
and I.
prevent it down the line.
I think you're right, and I think we have an agenda item under old business, which Stephen might cover sort of related to this. And much the same, in the same vein that Stephen, you just presented maybe some guidelines on things that go into the sewer system and, you know, who's sort of responsible for that. Given the fact that, you know, we're just a public entity that's passing along an accumulation of expenditures to its ratepayers. We're not paying dividends or salaries to any of us here. We need some real rigorous guidelines about how long before you can make a claim, what you can make a claim for, and things like that. And you know, this is a classic example of where I think we need to, where I think, not me, just I think we're hearing this.
No, I agree, and I think you're right to point out that this board has been talking about and plans to adopt a policy to address situations like these, so that there isn't this, you know, area of this gray area, you know, like what is our ability to be able to refund, sorry to use this term, but alleged, you know, lack of use of the sewer lines. Because all we can do is calculate water usage, so.
That's our
So-
primary source of billing,
All right,
comes from
well,
Aqua.
this was item number 11.4. I mean, I'm happy to hear any other comments from the board or any other questions before I put a motion up to, is anybody else, any questions, any concerns? And you can actually make a public comment after we put a motion up, right? He can do that, right? Okay, before we make a motion or, go ahead.
Not to oversimplify, but we've already paid over $20,000 in one quarter for the sewer bill. So this is just reimbursement for water in a way to try to figure out how we're going to show what water did not go through the sewer system. So, you know, I guess it takes a few months, whatever you determine. So far, we'll have 2 or 3 months to show what our normal usage through the system is to determine how much did not go through the system, if I'm making any sense.
Yeah.
So we've already made our payments on time, and it was a big one, two big ones we had to pay.
And when you get one bill in and then you distribute it to all of the different holders or the
The
association?
residents pay their dues, and then
then it's
the
from-
association pays the bill.
Gotcha.
And if we could get Aqua to meter every unit and take responsibility for the underground sewer system and water system, I think I'd die a happy man. But they will not. At some point, the builder back in the day decided it was going to be bulk water. We do have probably maybe half or more of our units that have meters that are not being used. But I believe that was at the very beginning as they were building the sections. They were unmetered, and then as they had completion of the development, they went to bulk water.
So those are no longer operational. They probably wouldn't.
They're not.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions based on that? No, I'm not sure that, you know, in light of where this board is going, that we want to wait and get a full year's worth of
I
meter
don't.
readings.
I don't. And I would offer a suggestion in light of my previous comments about our, you know, reliance on the reporting that Aqua provided. You know, if Aqua called up and said, you know what, we read the meters wrong, that would be an issue. Aqua, as our sole or as our primary provider of water consumption that we can then turn around and bill. You know, we relied on that. We posted a receivable, we took cash as payment. And now we have to sort of reverse it. And we kind of factored it into our budget for 2022. Probably factored it into where we are for 2023, which we'll talk about a little bit later in the agenda. You know, in the absence of guidelines, I would propose, you know, and with the way I'm thinking, and I'm not necessarily sure we want to do a motion tonight, but I'm of the vein of splitting the difference. Because again, we don't have any capital account to really sort of say, oh, we'll just post this up as as some type of a loss or a credit loss or a billing loss. And that sort of splitting the difference acknowledges the fact that we recognize the issue. It highlights the weakness in our revenue recognition process. And maybe to some extent, it even reaffirms why we have to have this policy in place. It may not be what the HOA wants. It's certainly not what I want. But that's where my head is at on this, whatever that number is, whether it's 9 or 12 or 15, or whether you want to wait.
I like where you're going, Louis.
I have a
Go ahead.
question. Could,
Sure.
in light of what Louis had said, would there be a way to, since we don't have a reserve account, could we deduct it as a prepayment for future?
We probably could, but let's talk about the number. I like where you're going as well. What I'm thinking as we're getting closer to having the policy in place, what I don't like is, you know, the leaking going on for such a significant period of time. When you talk about splitting the difference, I think we ought to be talking about, you know, we bill in quarters. So, you know, what was the over usage for a quarter? And do we want to split the difference on that amount?
I'm okay with that. I mean, it becomes to some extent.
Steve, get your calculator out over there.
Yeah, it becomes a little bit of a moving target. Maybe that's not the right term for it, but
I think what I guess I'm trying to say is, I mean, we certainly, you know, we are here serving.
Right.
You know, our own, you know, neighbors, you know, I mean,
Yeah,
we live in
that's
this
the
community
issue.
too. And I get it that, you know, you've had a pretty tough time with some leaks over there, but at the same time, you know, looking at it from the period of, I think it was June through November. So June, July, August, September, October, November, that's 6 months. Days in the period, daily use. So I guess we could take, because that is 6 months. Take that 6 month period, compare it to the last 6 month period. How much over was that? The same 6 month period, June through November of 2022, comparing it to, we have it right here, June through September 2021. So we have the numbers.
well, do we really want to do the math right now on the
No,
fly?
no, we don't want to do it on the fly. So,
The page 32 on the packet has that calculation.
32?
Yes,
Got
so
it.
the difference in gallon usage is 855,600.
Okay, yeah, so there it is. Okay, good. I thought it was down here. So it's 8,556. Can't really, it's kind of blurry.
855,600.
855,600. That's the average usage. What does that turn into? By way of EDUs or price?
The dollar amount would be $9,685.39.
That was the original amount. Okay, and that's for 6 months. See, I'm willing to, my recommendation would be 50% of 3 months, so it'd be 25% of that. But I'm willing to, you are willing to go.
That would
the
be
full 3 months
25% more than my,
Than your recommendation.
than my recommendation.
So. Really not a huge amount, but it does at least provide some relief. $55% of the 3 months. Or 25% of the amount that they're asking for.
I have it, that would be $2,421.35.
$2,435
$21.35.
I don't know that that would be acceptable, but does anybody want to make a motion at this point? We have a couple ideas on the table.
I am not comfortable just doing this math on the fly. I'd love to see a recommendation on paper and not just go back to old paper and
Okay.
redo
because
it.
what-
Stephen,
what I'd
that
like
has
to
nothing
look
to
at-
do with
Yeah.
the math, but
Okay, so we'd like to see the 3 month usage. I would like to anyway, and we'll consider some portion of that, either all of it or a portion of it.
But I
Next
would,
week.
I mean, I offered up a concept of splitting the difference, and I would love to hear my other 3 colleagues, their just sort of view on, one way or the other. I mean, I am interested in an opinion.
Yeah.
Because I can be influenced too.
I agree. I think it's fair. It's a good way to look at it.
And moving forward, this is how it's always gonna be calculated? No. That's where our policy comes into play.
No, that's,
You guys are going to discuss this a little bit more, a little later in the agenda, but you gave us some pretty significant direction on our policy. We made some attempt to, well, not really, because I got sick mostly, but our intention was to get together, the 3 of us, and try to put something together for you for this month. Unfortunately, we didn't have the opportunity to do that. So once we get off this issue, when you get to the other, I'd suggest that you approve a policy for 2023 based on your discussion at the January meeting, subject to one of our approval. We'll get something together for you, and as belts and suspenders, we'll also put it on the agenda to ratify for the March meeting. So it won't always be like this. It'll probably be more stringent than what you're doing tonight, because we heard what you said last week.
Okay.
But it's not a policy we have in place at this point.
so that answers your question, Paul. Anybody else? I mean, if you want to make a motion, Louis, for the 50% of the amount requested, I'm happy to entertain.
I would make that motion, and provided we're comfortable with the calculation, subject to, somebody looking at it, a second person validating that number. We've agreed it would be a quarter. Correct? Quarters usage. 50% of that.
I think I just want clarification, because the number would be very different depending on which quarter we use. And so that's why I'm having a hesitancy.
The most
here.
leaky quarter.
And because if I'm right, they would actually pick July, August, and September as their quarter, because that's actually what the quarter bill was on. And so if that's what you're agreeing to, then we would do the calculation that way. If you're actually saying 3 of the 6 months, then that's different. And that's why I just need a little bit of direction.
3 of the
Because-
6 months, come up with
3
an
of
average
6
for the 6 months. 3 months of that, and then
Yeah.
we split the difference.
I mean, mainly.
And I'm
because-
very uncomfortable with doing it like this, but we can't keep carrying these things from
Just
meeting to
takes
meeting. It's
too
not
much
fair
time,
to
too.
the staff, it's not fair to the authority, it's not fair to the HOA, and I want to be done with it. And I would, first of all, I would congratulate the HOA for actually aggressively going after some of these leaks. And hopefully serve as a bit of a model for the way people need to maintain their inherited environment. Developers do things entirely differently across the board. And I'm not going to vote to approve any of these going further.
Yeah. I mean,
I'm
I
done.
think that's.
I'm
that's
done,
where-
and to some extent, this one is probably highlighted.
The need for a policy and for, kind of streamlining.
And I
things.
want to be, and where I continue to go back to this notion of a reserve or a capital account for these things. We don't add a profit margin on our billing rates. Like other utility providers, and built into Aqua's billing charge is profit. Sharing, dividends to shareholders. We don't have any of those things, and so we do our best to allocate costs each year. In fact, when we go through the budget later, it's an allocation of costs, which, by the way, we have no control over. We get charges from 2 different sewage conveyance organizations, and we don't have an ability to appeal those. We have to pass them on, and when you're in that kind of situation where you have no control over expenses, you have to have some control over revenue.
Yeah, and I think that all the more reason why on the next agenda, we'll have a some certain.
That's
As
fair.
a motion on the agenda. Okay,
Even if it's not calculable right now, let's do that at the next meeting.
unless it's calculable, unless you're very comfortable with the direction that we've given you. And are able to come up with that number with confidence. Which I don't think is fair to you to put you on the spot like that, Steve, so.
Yeah, I know I know you'd like to bring resolve to this.
Yeah.
On one level tonight. But if we're going to do this, I want to make sure we do
Okay, that's fair.
our homework.
I have no problem
And
with that.
I would actually suggest our new finance officer work through it with Steve, just to make sure I'm not missing and I'm not calculating incorrectly.
And working with Mr. Young too, to make sure you're telling him which 3 months and the whole deal.
Yep.
Okay. All right. All right, so I guess we don't need a motion to table that item or anything. We'll just move on.
And I just want to sort of emphasize, because, I always come back to numbers. I mean, this is not about the HOA. This is about, maintaining some semblance of equity with everybody else who's going to have to pick this up.
Okay. All right, thanks, everybody. Moving on, consider removing the late penalties from the 3rd quarter and the 4th quarter of 2022 for 401 College Avenue totaling $50.69. I'll make the motion. Do I hear a second? I can't second it, so. If you second it, if someone wants to second it, we can then discuss. Yep,
I'll second the motion.
thank you, Paul.
Was this one of the tabled items last
It is.
month? It was. Oh,
If you remember last month, it was on the agenda, but there was no dollars.
right. Okay,
Will this item be covered in our policy as well? Any requests?
Well, I think that one of the things I've been looking at is that if it's not handled at the time of within so many days of the billing, then it becomes, it goes, you're not even going to look at it, and you're gonna give us authority to do it, so it doesn't even become back to you. Is my understanding is what we're talking about.
We're gonna figure out a way to not have late charges.
I mean, it's either gonna be on them or you're gonna have given us the authority to waive it if there's some kind of waiver that can be given.
Yeah, and this has nothing to do with the meters. This is just a penalty for failure to pay timely.
I don't, this one was,
Yeah.
this was.
Yeah.
Would you remember why this was late?
The homeowner reached out to us and requested the removal of late penalties because they attended a zoning meeting. And they claimed that it impacted their family budget and they just wanted to appeal the late charges.
Anything else
That's all we have from them.
as far as comment on that? As far as backup information? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay. Okay. Next, moving on, consider approving a refund in the amount of $224.93 to James Wallenberger at 506 Park Hill Lane due to missed second meter reading in the second quarter of 2022. The refund would cover the second quarter and the third quarter of 2022.
Can I clarify that amount?
Go ahead.
What do you have, Ken?
On mine, I have $224.93.
Yeah.
Did I say the wrong amount?
I have 3,836.07.
Oh, no, I have
11,600?
224.93.
Oh, that's the one I printed out. Oh, it must have changed on the updated version. Got it. Okay.
Yeah, so I published it on Friday initially, and then I made the change.
Gotcha.
What's the number?
Is just clarity, is the 230?
The 224.93 is the correct amount.
Oh, wow. Okay.
224.93.
Okay, do I have a motion?
Move.
Thank you, Louis. Do I have a second?
Second.
Hey, any questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, moving on, new business, 12.1, consider approving the 2023 municipal authority budget. Steve,
Why don't you start? Just start with the debt and infrastructure funding, and then we'll.
Yes.
I would just make note as we're moving into that, there was one other one that was on your agenda last month. Steve and I talked about it. I asked him actually not to put it on your agenda because we didn't have good answers. And I wasn't willing to put it on your agenda until we did.
Okay.
So I just want you to be aware of that. So I'm going to, if I can, I'm going to kind of quickly go through this to give you an overview. I didn't get here on my own. I want, Lou and Tom worked with us on this, and we've probably been meeting almost a whole year now, I think, kind of going back and forth, talking about how to address this issue. We've done a lot of looking at how to do this overall and what the process was going to be, and what made the most sense. And I'm just going to quickly share, and then if Louis or Tom want to weigh in, feel free and add anything new that I might miss. I have two things I want to make quick comment on. The second yellow line, for those that are not colorblind, but where it says current customer, that really should be current customer EDUs, so that it's clear. And then new customer EDUs should be the next line down. And I will get that changed just so everybody understands. We looked at that's not the number of customers that we have. We actually have less customers because some customers have multiple EDUs, if that makes sense. So what we did, the first part of this is looking at debt service. We have a 2.1 million or 2.15 million, debt service payment every year, between now and I believe it's 2048. And so, how are we going to cover that? And so we started looking at it and we said, based on the number of EDUs, if we divide that out and I did some numbers back and forth, it works out to about $287 a year for each EDU to help cover the cost of this. And if I were to do that and just no matter how it works out about that number. So how do we get to the 287 in regards to getting people there? One option that we had was to just use tap-in fees for the next 3 years and pay this bill down and, pay the debt. Then in year 2025, because we are trying to have the year ahead, the way this works is you have a year ahead for your number so that in year 30, you don't even have to charge the fee, but you would basically in year 2025, you would insert and you would immediately go to 287. And we talked about this pretty extensively. That's a pretty big hit for some folks. And so we came back and said, what if we do it over, how far out can we stretch the EDUs that we have on hand and we'll be bringing in and make that work. And so if we do stretch that out, we get we can actually not be the 287 until 2027. But we actually do a little bit of an increase every year. And so people get used to it. I say used to it, you're adding basically 5740 each year for the next 5 years and you do that. And so it's not coming in as one lump sum in 2025, you're doing it over steps.
Short of any other activity we would undertake.
Sure, right. Yeah, this is just
What we know today.
This is what we know today, and this covers debt service where it stands right this minute. If you had a catastrophic issue and you had to take out other additional debt service, you would have to go do that, and that would have to be added in. And I think that's a very good point, Louis, that we don't want to make this sound like, there's not any possibility that for change. There is a possibility for change. The other possibility would be, what if more people hooked up than what we're proposing? We potentially could have an impact on the other end, either paying the debt off sooner or reducing the cost of what it costs per EDU based on that. This is what we think is realistically going to happen over the next 5 years, and we'll watch it. And if it's not what realistically is happening, we're going to have to adjust accordingly. But that's, you plan based off of what you know, and this is what we know today, and this is the plan. So the second part of that was that we really talked about, and by the way, this is over both SR2 and SR3. We're treating the whole system as one going forward. And so the second part of this was we really looked at the infrastructure fee. And again, we talked about the fact that we had a single repair that we bid out. We didn't actually move forward, but we bid it out. And it was $350,000 to fix 350 feet of line. I do think we were also fixing 2 manholes, but it was a very short distance. And if you look at our map, of our sewer map, and you start looking at all the pieces of line and if you were just to multiply that out, it would give you heart failure as to what it would potentially cost to do the whole system. And so we said, we've got to start having some dollars for you all to make some decisions about being proactive in addressing some of these repairs, instead of being in this situation where we have to make a move and we potentially are going to pay a lot more. How do we set ourselves up where we can go out and maybe do some bidding of some projects where we do more repairs at one time, hopefully paying less on fees of, getting set up initially to do the project and those kind of things. So that's the plan. And so we looked at this, and again, we said,
Stephen,
I'm sorry.
Can I add to what you're
Oh,
saying there?
absolutely. Please do.
There was you provided RHM's meter readings for January.
Yes.
For us. And if you just look at the day of and the day after, some of those big heavy rain days we
Oh my
had in
gosh, yes.
January, our sewer meter going into RHM was through the roof, which means our existing infrastructure is bringing in rain and we're getting billed for rain, and we don't have any recourse because it's going through a meter. So, you know, it may not be a catastrophic failure, but there are weaknesses in at least the old side right now. So
Yeah, and look, and it has you know, Dave, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it has a direct impact even for us in that if somebody's trying to build on the SR2 side of the township, which goes to RHM, just kind of put in perspective, that's a real challenge today because there's a moratorium on new EDUs. And so it really is a challenge. So if we can start to address that and we can start to clean that up, we potentially allow for either to add new residents that we know are coming, you know, we know we've got a couple spots, but you know, we have a whole section of the township on the north side that we haven't even talked about putting public sewer in yet. And so how are we ever going to address those things? And so we need to get the system buttoned up tight. The other piece of that is if we address that, when downstream continues to have problems with I&I and they're paying penalties, I would think we have a lot to argue that we've spent the dollars on our system cleaning up. And if we can show that we've reduced this to happen, I think that it's in our favor because it's coming. I mean, the DEP has basically put the Eastern Philadelphia plant aside on notice that there's going to be some heavy fines. I think, you know what year it starts? Is it 2006? I mean, 26?
Not sure, Steve.
But-
It's coming soon.
It's coming soon. So we need to be progressive, aggressive and progressive in addressing this. So anyway, I share that. So again, a similar situation. I don't know the right number here. This number is a little less set, but what we know is the number's bigger than what we're projecting to bring in. That I can tell you what the cost will be. And so we again did a $20 per year increase. It's $20 a year now, $20 a year increase for the next 5 years to get us up to 120 with that idea. Look, do I believe that's a lot for people to swallow? I do. So I'm not making light of that, but we're in a situation where we have to address what the issues are. And so this is the best way to address it. We've spent a lot of time looking at it. I don't know if Louis and Tom want to add anything else before we get into the budget part itself.
no, I think, you know, despite this being a sort of a forward-looking budget you've put together over time, it's not static. It needs to be addressed by this board every year. And I don't want to call it an audit, but a reconciliation in the board's mind about whether it's appropriate or not. What I would say is, you know, you have an expert's opinion on it not being enough. We're not the experts, so we're going to need some type of report and survey and feedback on the status of some of this old infrastructure. You'll likely want to ask us, should we do item A first or item B first? And we just don't know where it is, where in the street, where in the ground any of this is. So you'll have to tell us.
Yep. We realize there's a lot of information still has to be brought together. You still need a lot of information, and some of that's actually going to be learning as we go. In that, if you recall, well, let's go ahead and Steve, flip over to the budget, flip over to the expense side, if you can, please.
And your notes that you included in the package were helpful because that one small, you know, 350 feet of pipe costs about $1,000 a foot. So
Yeah.
the whole job, not the pipe itself.
It's amazing how expensive that gets. So I'm going to skip over a lot of things. I'm happy to cover anything that you all want to talk about in the budget. I hope you've looked at it. I want to focus on a couple things though. I want you to look on lines. it's the line that says pipe maintenance, contracted sewer line maintenance.
Yep.
Those areas. So, we've put into the budget, basically 122,000. And most of that focus is getting out, doing a cammering of the line and doing like I'm gonna say a roto-rooter. I don't know what a better way to describe it. It's basically chewing out the roots that get into these lines, particularly into these clay lines that are clay pipe lines. The roots tend to break through those and get in. And so this is all about trying to get in and clean that up. The infrastructure dollars would hopefully then go back and we would look at an area and say, look, we went in and cleaned this. It's very clear we have leaks between here and here. And maybe we can just do a lining of the pipe. And if we could do that, that's for sure I would say the least expensive of the options. I don't know if it's really the least expensive, but it's hopefully less expensive than having to go out and dig up and spend $1,000 a foot. You know, I don't think it would cost us that to do a lining. But I do think that we want to look, I just want you to see that we're putting, not only are we putting money aside to do projects and looking at it, but we're also investing in the operating side to go determine exactly where the best place is to do that, because we don't have 100% guarantee of where that is ourselves, but this is the spot. The other thing that I would make note under yeah, go down a little bit. There was you could see under the wastewater treatment charges, which is kind of right there where Steve's piece is. It's right above Marple Township and Radnor Township agreements, and I can talk about that if somebody has a question. But that area there was a huge increase. I say huge increase, but a significant increase.
More than 10%.
More than 10%. So that's a big increase. Most of that, I'll be honest with you, came from CDCA, came from the fact that we had new usage, but it's also, they had a 6% increase this year. And so we experienced that. So I wanted you to see that. And then
I just, so I know that you're a member of CDCA.
I was, I'm not well, the township is a member.
No,
I used to be the representative.
yeah.
but-
So, we ever have a chance to sort of scrutinize their processes or operations, or we just have to take the bill and pay it?
Well, I mean, so it's really a calculated percentage based on our usage compared to the usage of the other municipalities.
Right.
And so it's actually it's made up of three components. One component is our actual usage, and that percentage of usage based on everybody else's percentage of usage and what they get billed by Delcora to process that percentage of usage and what it costs for them to move the waste from their pipes down the rest of the way. And so there's a fee for that. And it's very, if we have 10% of the flow, we pay 10% of the cost. And so it's a pretty direct.
So we have no influence on their
No real influence other than if we could figure out how to reduce our flow going back to the line. If we have the same kind of problem in some of the old pipes on the eastern side, on the western side as we do on the eastern side, then maybe we could do it if we could reduce the infiltration into the system during rain events. That always helps. We're not paying, goes back to the whole concept of what you're saying, like, you got a leaky pipe, you pay for the leaky pipe. Well, that's what we do.
Right.
So they're very straightforward. The second part of that is there's a portion that the CDCA upgraded their system so that Edgemont, Newtown, and Upper Providence could join. We were late joiners. The rest of them were in it prior. And so we all came to the table a little later. And in doing so, they had to upgrade the system, and there was some debt they had to take on to handle our amount of waste that we over a period of time said we were going to send their direction. And so there's that piece. And then in addition to that, they had to do some upgrades to their whole system, just because like we've been talking about the fact that you start having failing systems and doing those kind of things, they've had to do those upgrades. And so we get a portion based off of the years, or based off of our usage at the time for that and what the agreement said. And I have to go back and look at the agreement, but it's all calculated out. I've looked at the numbers several times, and it is, I mean, it's a pretty straightforward calculation. I can do it, so I think it's not like you need an actuary or
Any
somebody to get
actions
into.
that CDCA or RHM take that might cause a fine or a penalty being assessed by the DEP or the EPA or whomever to CDCA or RHM, we would have to pay that?
Yeah, I think we
We'd
would
have
be.
to pay our fair
We
share.
pay
of
our
their
fair share because
mistake.
we're a member, you know, it's, think about it kind of like the resident, if we had a fine applied to us, we would probably pass it out to all the residents who are ratepayers, and that would just be the way it would happen.
Okay.
If that makes sense. That's why them being, I don't know if you all remember, I can't remember if you were all on the board at the time when they presented the 537 change that they were going to put this huge pipe in. I mean, like when I say a huge pipe, it's like a tunnel that you could walk through. I mean, it's like you could drive through this tunnel. It's that big. And it's supposed to be able, do you remember how many gallons it's supposed to hold? It's some ridiculous number of gallons of water that is wastewater is supposed to hold, going from one of its pump stations coming down into the treatment plant at Delcora. And the idea is that when a rainstorm happens and we have all this inflow that's beyond what the system can handle, instead of having it discharged and having a potential penalty, you would collect it and then treat it over a period of time. And you would have several days that you would use to bring down that. And so that's the idea. But literally you could drive a Mack truck or, you know, like a full
Yeah.
tractor trailer through this tunnel.
Yeah, they're gonna use a tunnel boring machine to bore this thing out. It's gonna be 100 feet below surface. And this goes back to what Steve had mentioned about the Delaware River Basin Commission assessing fines to Delcora and the city of Philadelphia for these wet weather overflows that discharge sewage into the Delaware River. So that's part of what Delcora is planning to mitigate that, so they don't have to pass those costs on to the municipalities, but municipalities are gonna have to pay their fair share of this infrastructure.
We're gonna pay for
Of
it.
the improvement.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's probably one of the most expensive business, you know, like when you talk about a cost, wastewater is a huge cost. I mean, it's incredibly expensive to move wastewater and to treat wastewater. And it just is, and it's getting more expensive all the time. And the regulations get tighter, and as the regulations get tighter, and I'm not saying they shouldn't, I'm just saying as they get tighter, they cost us as ratepayers more. And so the other thing, if you have more questions, I'm glad to answer that. But I hope that answered your question. The other area that we think that we talked about in regards to, you'll see some increases, is the transfer to capital, and all that's related to the dollars that we're bringing in, not only for infrastructure fees, but also not only for tap-in fees, but also for infrastructure fees as well as some tap-in fees. I think I said that right. Actually, this year we would use all the tap-in fees that we brought in, plus we would use some that we had in reserve. And then the next year we would do the same thing. So that's the plan. You can see where it's 6.3 million. In this year, we would actually end up with about $50,000 of surplus, which is very small when you look at that number. And that's where we are with that. So the revenues on the other side, I can go through those, but basically your revenues come from three main areas: your sewer rents, and then also your tap fees and your infrastructure fees. And there's, you know, a few other dollars in some other places, but those are the main areas. Do you have questions on the budget? And in your packet, by the way, Steve's showing this, but in your packet, I took the budget out, I think to 2032 or something like that. 34, with some estimates, and most of those had like, you know, cost of living at 3%, just to kind of say where we would be. And I did some numbers, and I can tell you our revenues don't keep up with our expenses. So I'm hoping that the increases aren't really what I estimated, but if they are, we're going to have some challenges going forward.
Yeah, but
to
it's
look
a
at that.
good exercise to look at what we know today, how it impacts the out years. Next year, it gets more precise. The year after, it gets more precise.
We just keep watching it and
Keep watching it. What I would say is, first of all, you accomplish a number of things that we talked about over this past year. The first of which is breaking out really what it costs to run, maintain the system. The second is, which I think this board talked about earlier in the year, really trying to look at the municipal authority system as one system, despite its components and where some of the flow goes. And I think that this accomplishes that, and it makes it easier for us to sort of think about because it all benefits, whether you're on SR2 or SR3 or not even connected, it benefits the community, the township for sure. If you have a septic tank and somebody else has a sewage leak, it impacts potentially a stream or a river that runs through the township. So I think that this is good. The only thing I would, and if I'm stating the obvious, please just say it, but as we start collecting the sort of debt service fee and the infrastructure fee, those will be accounted for separately, and one would do a reconciliation so that cash is fungible, but those funds shouldn't be fungible.
Correct. That's we do that every year anyhow, but yes, we will.
Right. So I know we have a new finance director.
I have actually kind of given her this in a nutshell today. We probably talked about it for an hour and a half, 2 hours, this whole piece. I wanted her to be aware, and so.
Yeah, and a lot of the thinking we worked through with Rich, which I don't think he would dial in on this call, but you know, if you have a chance to thank him, you know, for some of the early work on this.
Oh, absolutely.
That would be good. So this is, nobody likes costs going up, but we have absolutely no control over our sewage charges that we have to pass through. So one last, the projections, and this year, does it contemplate some of the new units and new construction coming online?
It does.
It does. Oh,
All right. I think
One of the things that I'm sorry, one of the things that I want to share with you though is sometimes we get hit late with the next charge. Like this is one of those things where the CDCA and RHM both do a true up at the end of the year. And so sometimes we don't even, we know what we're supposed to be. And then as we get near the end of the year, they come back and say, well, you said we thought you were going to be 10% of the overall. You ended up being 12% of the overall. So here's the additional cost because Delcora hit CDCA with additional costs or hit RHM.
Yeah, I don't know which one it was, but one of them was a credit in the
first year. RHM was the credit this year. So, and some years that's the way it is. Other years it's much smaller. Some years it's larger, and we just don't know that number until we see it. But when they tell us what the number is, that's the number that I budget to. Sorry, I'm.
No. I mean, this is the most important thing we talk about, really. And I don't believe we made a motion to approve the budget but okay, so we've discussed it. I'll make a motion at this point to approve the 2023 municipal authority budget as presented.
Second.
Any further questions or comments about the budget? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, next, moving on to yet another financial issue that will probably require some explanation. is the approval of the 2023 fee schedule, which was in everybody's packet.
Yeah,
Steve,
so
do you want to give us a bit of a summary?
I'm gonna give a really quick, what I think we are, where we are with this. So basically, it's pretty much the same as it was last year, except for about 4 lines, I think.
Okay.
So well, actually, 6 lines. So District 2, which is what we call SR2, went from 902 1,000 gallons to 1010 1,000 gallons.
Okay,
And that was partly related, when we put the combined budget together, prior to putting the combined budget together, I looked at the revenues for SR2 versus SR3. And the part of the issue was SR2 was going to be in a deficit anyhow. So we had to do it. The second piece is, as we're moving the two together, we wanted to do that as well and have a solid rate that's the same all across the system. And so this is starting to move us to the same rate across the entire system. So that's the very top line from 902 to 1010. I don't remember what the line exactly was prior, the next line down, but the well rate literally is a calculation of the rate per gallon times 225 gallons a day times 365 days a year, divided by that number, and that's how you get to the 830, and that's the number that comes out to be. And so then going down to residential infrastructure fee is the $10, and then the commercial infrastructure is also $10, but it's $10 per EDU that they would have, and that's either purchased and or calculated, and we work through that. And then the next one down is the debt service fee, and that's $435 per thousand, I mean, per EDU quarterly.
14.
Huh?
14.
Well, I'm sorry, what did I say? 1435 quarterly per EDU, and the commercial is the same as that. So that's what we basically did. We went through and did those calculations, and that's how we came up with those numbers. And that's what you saw in the budget that you approved. These fees match how to achieve the budget that you just approved.
And just as a matter of mechanics, we will vote on the fee schedule, and then we'll vote on the resolution as separate items. Okay.
I just have a quick question. Why are
Separate.
residential and commercial infrastructure fees the same?
Well,
Based on EDU?
it's based on an EDU. So
Okay.
I could have said, we could have said it's $10 per EDU residential and construction. I mean, and construction and commercial, but we don't go back and look at a residential use and determine whether it's using for more than one EDU. Where we do that with a construction, we actually evaluate their usage. I mean, commercial, I'm sorry. It's got the wrong word in my head tonight. The commercial is actually based on what they purchased or what's calculated if afterwards they're using more than what they calculated.
I know I'm a little late to the party on this issue, but when you talk about the distinction between residential and commercial, and especially restaurants and the problems that they bring to our system, do we have any form of means of charging those restaurants when we have these violations of grease and everything else?
We do on the township side for a little bit but that's part of what I wanted to meet. That's part of what I asked you about earlier. I want to be much more proactive instead of being reactive. And potentially.
Even Dunwoody, right? Because they have food services there on
Absolutely.
a large scale. Restaurants have food services on a large scale. And I mean, in the restaurant environment, they're not living there. We all run our houses. We don't want our pipes to clog, and therefore we're not putting grease down our pipes. When you have
Sure.
employees working in an environment that, I'm not saying they all don't have protocols, but it just seems to me that the township, through, these are some significant fee increases when you think about it overall.
Yeah,
You know, in one sense, we're underwriting, you know, some of these commercial usages and the impact that they have on the system.
and that's the reason why when when I talked to you earlier about saying when I mentioned about Dunwoody, that I would like to engage, you know, our solicitor and engineer in a discussion about this. I want to come up with what we can legally do. And I mean, I think there are some things that we're not doing today that we potentially could do on the inspection side. And I think we should do those. And I think we should hold them accountable and, you know, and get it to where it needs to be, because it's obviously they're not doing what they need to do, or we wouldn't be having these problems over and over again. And so let's us take a different approach of how we're going to approach it.
Yeah,
And
I think that's fantastic. And I think I'm glad we looped back to that because, you know, we want to put them on, we want to do whatever we're able to do by way of putting them on notice as to
Yep.
what their responsibilities are and then how we can hold them accountable. If that is from a financial perspective, then great.
Yep.
But we can't just kind of overlook all of this and have these infractions go on, you know, again and again.
Yeah, and if I might add,
Paying professionals to go out and look and deal with these problems. And now we have all these new restaurants coming.
Yep.
You know, like, I mean, how many new restaurants are coming?
yeah, without being proactive, it becomes increasingly more difficult to troubleshoot it and point the finger after the fact. When you have a problem to try to back trace where the source is, it becomes very difficult to do that. I think being more proactive gives us a more of a legal standing too, and it might be, you can.
Yeah, if we have to go out there and
Yes.
if we have to go out there and
Yeah.
inspect, can we charge an inspection fee? Can we charge for a?
This proactivity is analogous to our processes and policies. also.
Correct.
yeah, exactly.
Hand in hand. Good.
Okay.
Before you vote, I have one other thing I just want to say. I neglected to put something into the fee schedule that will probably coming back to you next month with. And that was a second meter fee for those who have second meters, because we've gone from having about 10 or 12 second meters and we're up over 100 now. In fact, we probably have added 100. We're probably over 112. So I just want you to know that we're going to come up with something, and I'll get you back to you as to what the exact amount is, and that will probably be an adjustment to this next month. But we need that. But we may also, once we get the other in place, have the other as well. So just know that that's coming.
That's right. Okay. Thank you. All right, so we'll then approve, well, can I have a motion to approve the 2023 fee schedule as presented?
So moved.
Second, thank you. And any further questions or comments on that? All those in favor? Aye. And I think we can move right on to the similar information. May I have a motion to adopt the resolution 2023-01 for setting the SR2 and SR3 sewer rates for 2023. The resolution is in the packet. I don't believe we need to read it unless somebody wants me to read the resolution.
No, I don't think you need to read. Summary is you've said what it does.
Okay,
I might bring it on the screen so Tom can fix it. When he calls me tomorrow and tells me that. At least have an actual point of reference. No, did he?
Yeah.
No, take it down.
so, and the rates are set forth in the fee schedule, which we
Correct.
just approved as well.
I'll make a motion to adopt resolution number 2023-01 as presented.
Okay, do I hear a second?
Second.
And any further questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, moving on. Consider approving consider an advertising for on-site review meetings at Newtown Township Municipal Authority pump stations.
Would you like me to give you a quick update?
Which
What that
mind
is?
very
Sure.
quickly.
So.
given the hour.
Given the hour, I'll be as quick as I possibly can. So one of the things that I realize is that at least four of you probably have, other than maybe Tom seeing the one in his backyard, but most of you have probably never really seen our pump stations up close and personal. And so what I'd like to do is set up a time for us to take you around to see all those. We'll start working on a date, but if you give us authority to advertise, we'll do kind of like what date works for you. And then we'll advertise that we're doing it because we're going to try to take all five of you at once. Out of abundance of caution, if you discuss something about it, we've at least gone on record that you're doing that. I mean, we wouldn't do any formal action in the field, but if you came back and you had some deliberation about a pump or about a piece and somebody said, well, you talked about something beyond that, we've covered you so that you're covered.
Unless the public shows up.
Uh,
here too, right?
yeah,
That's right.
yeah.
That's the downside to it.
But-
My suggestion would be that you just go and shut your mouth.
Mm.
And not discuss.
Yeah.
I mean,
Or
you-
we can
obviously,
receive information,
You can
so,
receive information, you can ask questions about information. What you can't do is deliberate. Oh, I think we should fix this.
Oh, God.
or I think we ought to
I-
fire that contractor who's doing this
Yeah.
work.
Yeah.
So all
I-
of that would be.
I just know that's what we've done with road program for the township. We just advertise it. We've never had any public come, but you're right. You take the risk of that and so whatever
And
you'd
the
like. to-
public do not have.
Yeah,
the
you don't want
opportunity
them
to attend. So,
It's one thing for somebody to show up at the corner of a here and there. It's another thing to put them in a pump station.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. We will just move on.
yeah. And I'd rather do that in the spring, only.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know,
We're not going to
yeah.
do it in the middle of the winter, but
Yeah.
I want to start working on it and get it lined up.
They're not. gonna leave.
Okay,
There won't be
Um,
any attendees.
although, yeah, but the spring's probably the best.
I was
Avoid
gonna
any
say-
Smell in the summer.
Next week would be a really good time because it seems like it's warm enough right now. It's warm.
Exactly.
I'm afraid spring is going to be really cold. So-
agreed.
Yeah. Okay, so I don't think we need any action.
All
on
right,
that.
so I will not worry about that.
Okay, moving on to old business, the refund policy, which we have discussed with respect. Mike, could you give us a summary of where we're at right now on this policy? And I'm thinking that we could put a motion on the floor.
Yeah, I think you gave us direction that you want specific timeframes, that you really want a limited look back on if someone misses a meter reading or whatever the case may be. So Steve and I have actually sat at meetings last month and this month and bounced ideas off each other. What we haven't done is sat in a room with Dave and actually put pen to paper yet. But I think you've given us sufficient direction that you can approve a policy based on that direction, subject to our review or subject to our final approval. And then we'll also add it as a ratification, sort of as a second measure of protection.
All right, so I'll make the motion to adopt the refund policy based on the direction previously provided to our solicitor, subject to legal review.
I'll
I'm-
second that.
Okay. All right, any other questions or comments about that? All right.
One comment I would make, that policy is, I think, a proactive, reasonable way to avoid asking each ratepayer to set aside money that we put in a reserve for billing adjustments. And so it's, in theory, it's going to be less cash out of everybody's pocket to satisfy others. And we heard that a little bit earlier this evening. Though these kinds of policies will be consistent. So that'll be good.
And make it easier for, anybody at the township answering the phones on behalf of the
Absolutely,
municipal authority to
absolutely.
respond with, clarity. Okay, all those in favor? Aye. All right, 13.2, consider approving a refund to Joseph Bernacci at 303 Green Bank. Green Bank Lane due to a missed second meter reading in the third quarter of 2022.
And this is the one that we talked about earlier, that we didn't have enough information for you to act on. We just didn't want to take it off of your agenda totally. It's there. You don't need to take any action on it tonight because I can't give you a dollar amount as to what it would be.
All right, so let's table that one for the next meeting until there's a dollar amount for us to consider. All right, any public comment? I don't see any members of the public remaining. Items for the next agenda, I think we've talked about the second meter fee. We've talked about the refund policy. We've just talked about another approval for a refund. We also have the HOA refund request for Hunter's Run.
Correct.
That's 4 things. And am I missing anything?
I don't think so at this time.
All right.
I mean, I know there's some things that will probably come to the table in light of the engineer's report. I just don't know what they'll be yet. And so until we get those, I don't know what they are.
Okay, problem. In that case, I will adjourn the meeting.
And I say thanks again